I think people suffer greatly and unnecessarily around unresolved insecurity. So this feels like the problem that I was born to solve, and it's something that I do with my whole heart and soul. So I think it's a global problem, as you mentioned, and is the biggest inhibitor of performance, not only in business but in life in general. So it's a very important subject, and it demands a clear, intelligent, and complete solution.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills, and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy, and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You will hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hi, freedom fighters. If you could solve your biggest problem in life, what would it be? More time, more money, a better job, better health, better relationships? How much of your time, energy and money are you investing in trying to solve this? I'm betting that you focus on something external. But what if these problems are just symptoms of a deeper problem? What if our biggest problem is internal, between our ears, and how we think and feel? How we think and feel about ourselves, and how we think about and see the world. The stories in our head that we've created about the world, in other words, what we believe. I'm talking here about our insecurity, our fear of our own inadequacy. But Bushy, I'm not secure. That's not me, I hear you say. I mean, just look at me. I've got a great partner and kids. I work hard and a good job. I'm respected for my work and who I am. I live in a nice house. I drive a nice car. I make good money. I'm not insecure. Really, come on. But what about that little voice in your head? That little nagging whisper that keeps telling you that you're not really happy and content with your life. My bet is that you've often feeling that you haven't achieved enough. That little negative Nelly or Neville that keeps saying you're not successful enough, you're not good looking enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not fit enough, you're not fast enough, you're not rich enough, you're just not good enough. And let me ask you these questions. Do you worry about what other people think? Do you worry about how you look? Do you always say exactly what you think or what people expect to hear? Are you comfortable disagreeing with others? Do you seek or need the recognition of others? Do you compare yourself with others? Do you find yourself criticising others and yourself? Do you ever envy others or feel jealous? Are you a perfectionist? Maybe a control freak? If you reluctantly said yes to any of these, then I hate to break it to you, but you're harbouring insecurity. And the good news is that you're not alone. We're all insecure about some things at some time or another, whether we want to admit that or not. And it's actually okay to feel insecure, and it's not your fault that you haven't identified it or solved your insecurity problems. Why? Because there's just so much working against us today that feeds our insecurity. Governments and the media are constantly peddling and instilling fear. Social media often focuses on spreading fear, and advertising promotes perfect images and flaunts fear, using constant comparison to emphasise our inadequacy. I can't even say it. Our inadequacy with whatever they're trying to sell. And even if we're aware of our insecurity, which is disguised in hundreds of symptoms, most of us don't even think we can fix it. Most messaging in this area seems to be about managing, masking or medicating insecurity in all of its insidious forms. There's an industry that's grown up of psychiatrists, counsellors and a host of others that is dancing around the subject without ever solving it. There's just so much working against us to solve our insecurities. It's why many of us are constantly feeling inadequate. We quietly fear that someone's going to find out that we're not good enough, we're not smart enough, we're not pretty enough, we're not strong enough. We're pretenders. We haven't earned it, so we don't deserve it. But here's the interesting thing. Today's guests help us to see that what we're really saying to ourselves when we think and feel this way is that we're actually afraid of our own opinion of ourselves. What we're saying is that in our mind, we're inadequate. We have a deep down opinion of ourselves that there's something wrong with us, something missing, something undeserving, something unworthy. And that opinion has gone unchecked and unchallenged. And in the word of today's guest, now we're continuously trying to do our best work in the world while this opinion is still bubbling away in the background of our subconscious, silently sabotaging all of our best efforts. This opinion is still in the back of our head. This opinion quietly threatens us. This opinion questions us with, are you really as good as you say you are? Are you going to be able to keep this up? Are you good enough for this? And in a strange way, your inner voice is trying to protect you so you don't make a fool of yourself. But until you stop blaming other things, acknowledge your insecurity, and examine yourself on that level, you're never going to fix it. And I know this because I've been there and I really struggled with insecurity, although for many years I didn't even recognise or realise that this is what it was as the base of my problems. You see, I spent the first half of my life absolutely driven by my insecurities. I was born with a hair lip and I was very young when I developed chronic asthma. And because we moved towns a lot with Dad's work, I ended up 2 years younger and a foot shorter than everyone else in my class. So I always felt like a sickly, punk-chested, short-ass runt of an outsider. So the way I learnt to cope and to prove myself and gain the acceptance and recognition that I craved was just to work way harder than everyone else. Even in high school, I was regularly up at 5 o'clock in the morning studying, and I'd study into the night and through my weekends just to ensure I got good grades. I was an absolute nerd. I convinced myself that I needed to be a hard-working perfectionist to get ahead. And this continued into my architecture studies at uni. For the last 2 years during my honours degree, I survived on an average of 4 hours sleep a night, and there were periods of 3 to 4 days when I wouldn't sleep at all. I was just propped up on no-dose pills. I was determined to get good grades at all costs. And the better I did, the better I needed to do, so the harder I worked. I became a victim of my own expectations of my success, and I was constantly stressed as I just worked harder and longer. And this carried over into my work life. And I was in a gut-busting hurry to become a world-renowned, award-winning architect. By then, I was working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and I did this for years on end. And for a while, my undiagnosed insecurities resulted in considerable outward success. But on the inside, it was killing me, and my insecurity was unquenchable, driving me above and beyond my limits. I wasn't aware of it, and my insecurity just was limitless. And what a miserable bastard I became as a result. Everything in my life had to be perfect. I became hypercritical of myself and others. I was a control freak of the highest order. And architecture was the perfect place to hone my perfectionism and my workaholism to the extreme. I'm sure it's the reason why architects have the highest divorce rate amongst any of the professions. I'd mistakenly convinced myself that anything in life could be solved and success could be gained by just working harder. And then, in my early 30s, I had my early life crisis, as opposed to my midlife crisis. And I suffered what we used to call a nervous breakdown. Now, I know, and now I joke about it because I always had to be the first and I like to get these things out of the way early. But sadly, I lost everything. My marriage, my career, my business, my wealth. I ended up burnt out, broke and broken. And I know now that all of this resulted from my lack of self-worth and my desperate need to prove myself to myself and others by working harder than anyone else. It wasn't until I stood back and had a really good look at myself and got some professional help with how I think and the misguided stories that I'd been telling myself and really started questioning my inherent flaws before things started to change. I came to realise that my insecurity meant that I had an incredible need for acceptance. I needed others to say I'm alright so that perhaps I could convince myself that I am alright. This also meant that I took rejection really hard, which means I was always trying to avoid confrontation, to become a pleaser. So, like a chameleon, I changed colour to suit the audience and the surroundings. I was everyone's friend, but I ended up losing myself in the process and compromising who I really was. I became so busy trying to please everyone else that I forgot who I am and what was really important to me. And at the bottom of all of this, I was insecure. This was a really tough but an important awakening and a big lesson for me. What about you? What deep-seated insecurities are you harbouring? Chances are you're not even aware of them. But if you're struggling in any area of your life, chances are that some form of insecurity is at the bottom of it. So here's a rub. The quality of the questions you start asking yourself and the level that you challenge your habitual subliminal thinking will determine your ability to start overcoming these deeply entrenched, subtle, yet very significant, tightly held insecurities. And here's the really good news that our guest shares with us today, that we can actually solve and eliminate these silent insecurity saboteurs. For many years now, I've been under the false impression that you just need to accept your insecurities and try and constantly work on them, that they'll never go away, until I discovered today's guest, Jaemin Frazer. Jaemin's an author, a TEDx speaker and a life coach. He's the founder of the Insecurity Project, and he specialises in helping you and other ambitious people experience deep change so that you're able to overcome your invisible internal limitations and finally enjoy the life you desire. He's widely recognised as one of Australia's leading life coaches, and he's one of the trusted voices globally in dealing with personal insecurity. He's also the voice behind the popular 1 Minute Coach radio segment featured on stations all around Australia. And he's the author of the awesome book, Elegantly Simple Solutions to Complex People Problems, as well as his soon-to-be-released book, Unhindered, that I'll talk more about shortly. Jaemin shows us that all we need is the right information to alter how we see ourselves and the world, and then it's possible to consistently show up at our best when it matters most. And whether we acknowledge it or not, we also have this deep down belief that we all have this magic inside of us, and if we're given the right opportunity in the right situation, we could deliver greatness and wow people and really make a difference in the world. But most of us never show up at our best when it matters most. And all of this because of our insecurities. So the good news is that Jaemin promises us that it's possible to solve our insecurity issues, not just ignore them and try and manage them. He shows us how we can fix our insecurities so that the stuff that's inside of us can start to illuminate the world and the dreams we have inside us can be achieved. For some time now, I've been talking about my realisation that sustainable success is only achieved at the intersection of self, health and wealth. And you need all three harmonising in concert to enjoy any enduring success. Ignore any one of them in this success triangle, and at some point, your house of cards will collapse. Many people chase wealth in the form of work, career, business or investments, like I did, and ignore their self and their wealth. Others will focus on their health, how they breathe, sleep, eat, exercise, thinking that their wealth is just going to look after itself. Or they ignore their wealth because their self has a poor relationship with money, so they never achieve or maintain their goals. Very few spend much time focusing on their self. And in my experience, sustainable success is all built on the foundation of self. Self is about what's between our ears, about how we think, our self-beliefs, our self-esteem, our self-worth, our self-talk, our mindset, our outlook, our attitudes, and our expectations. In other words, the stories that we tell ourselves about how the world works and how we interpret it. It's about our relationship with ourself. And it's all built on our level of self-esteem and self-worth, our level of subconscious adequacy or otherwise. Mastering self is the critical foundational step. It's the keystone. Ignore this and you'll never achieve any form of sustainable success in whichever way you choose to define it. At the end of the day, it's about becoming aware of your perceptions and self-thinking and then changing your own self-story and self-talk if it's not working for you. And to share a good example, I've just had a revelation that has absolutely changed my thinking. In preparing for my interviews with guests, I normally stalk them by reading their books, blogs, watching their videos and listening to their past podcasts so that I understand and appreciate who I'm talking to and can then frame the narrative of our conversation in a way that's going to bring out the best in the guest for your benefit. Now, while doing this for this week's episode, I've been reading Jaemin's first book, Elegantly Simple Solutions to Complex People Problems, and I had a series of light bulb moments. That sustainable success is about our mind state, not our work rate. While I sort of vaguely knew this in the far recesses of my mind, I've never been smacked in the face with it. And this is the mark of really good communicators. They say things that you may know or have heard from others, but they say it in a way that really cuts through and sheds light where there was dark. Now, to share the excitement of this light bulb moment, I'm going to paraphrase and read you some relevant excerpts of Jaemin's first book. So here we go. Having clear outcomes is critical to your capacity to move forward in life. So the most important question for you to answer is always, what do I really want? If you don't know what outcomes you're looking for, then how do you know there is anything wrong with the ones you've currently got? My bet is that as soon as you get clear about what you want, you'll instinctively jump to the how question. You'll want to figure out what to do to get what you want. The problem with this strategy is that often doing's not enough. You may put a plan in place and work very hard at it, but despite your determination and persistence, you just don't seem to be able to make it. You get close, but not close enough. You hit a brick wall. It doesn't matter how hard you work, you just don't have access to that outcome, and you end up with a feeling of frustration and hopelessness. Now, this really resonated with me, given my workaholic past. But here comes the kicker. Jaemin goes on. The key is to discover what actually makes your desired outcomes possible. It might be surprising to realise that more often than not, it's the state you're in that determines whether or not your desired outcomes are possible. Your state is king because it's the thing that gives you access to outcomes. This belief is based on the premise that there's no such thing as an unresourceful person, just an unresourceful state. When you're in a resourceful mental and emotional state, you can get stuff done in an hour that might take you 3 days to accomplish if you're feeling flat or discouraged. Being in a great state, being in the zone, being on fire, experiencing flow, or whatever you want to call it, opens up a new realm of possibilities. Outcomes are simply the fruit of possibilities made available by the state that you're in at any given time. Top sports people understand the power of state management better than most. The difference between the world's best and a player ranked in the top 100 is not actually about skill. They all have incredibly high levels of skill. It's about their ability to access the magic when they need it. An elite player may have moments of brilliance followed by moments of madness. However, the world's best don't crumble under pressure. They are far more consistent. They can access the best of themselves under immense external pressure. If you can control your state, you can control your outcomes. You're always in a state of some kind, but it's not always a state that will let you access the outcomes you're after. Now, there are a whole bunch of rituals or rhythms that, when applied, will have the net result of leading you into the state that will get you the outcomes you want. Having a great state is not random. It's unlikely that you will just wake up one day in state, because state is crafted from inputs. If you want great outcomes, you'll need to learn how to create a great state, because when it comes to outcomes, state is king. So you need to start asking yourself a different question. When you get up in the morning and are very clear about what you want and why you want it, instead of asking what you need to do to get that, ask what you need to do to get into the right state to get that outcome. When you're in the peak performance state for that particular outcome, the game's going to change. In a peak performance state, you'll have access to what you need to get what you really want. And this boils down to the difference between self-discipline and self-permission. Rituals are key to creating states. Rituals are the little things that we do all the time, whether intentionally or not, that affect our mental and our emotional states. They're not connected to outcomes. Disciplines, by contrast, are actions that are directly connected to the outcome we're after. I'm convinced that most people overestimate the usefulness of discipline and underestimate the power of state. If working hard to get what you want is your best and only strategy, I guarantee the only consistent outcome you'll experience is disappointment and pain. The kind of rituals I practice are life-giving things that create a great state. Now, at this point, I'm going to insert some of my own personal ritual examples. My thank you gratitude mantra when I wake up in the morning that immediately puts me in a state of joy, bliss and abundance. Smile time and cuddle time with my wife and our Samoyed dogs when we get up. My first cup of coffee. Taking our dogs for our morning walk out in nature and the fresh air. My daily 7-minute workout challenge that works every muscle in my body and gets my blood pumping and clears my mind. Getting motivated and inspired by a great podcast or a YouTube video. Listening to and playing beautiful lilting piano solos. Music really moves my emotions. Practicing and playing hockey. Going to the movies. Enjoying a leisurely big break at our favourite cafe on Saturday mornings. Or chilling out and reading a great book. My Kindle goes with me everywhere so I can steal quiet moments to read while I'm in transit or waiting for someone. Now, paraphrasing Jaemin, I don't need to discipline myself to do these things. Rather, it's about giving myself permission to go where the life is. The biggest challenge of living by state management, as opposed to just working hard through discipline and determination, is your capacity to listen to yourself and then trust yourself. Life-giving rituals that create a great state are entirely subjective though. What's good for me may create a really poor state in you. No one else is going to suggest I go to the movies instead of doing work, let alone give me permission to do so. Often we're far too concerned about what we should be doing and what everyone else expects of us, rather than listening to our own ideas about what would give us life and open the doors to the outcomes we want. And here is Jaemin's next revelation for me. It's about energy management, not time management. When you become outcomes focused, it's easy to become very conscious of how you're spending your time. However, effective state management is actually more about managing your energy than about managing your time. Energy is a far more useful resource than time could ever be. Imagine you've been given a week to get an assignment done, yet you're feeling flat and totally lacking in motivation. All that time's almost useless to you. Now think of what it would be like if you only had 1 hour to do something important but you were in absolute peak state. What you could do in that hour with maximum energy is nothing short of awesome. Hal Elrod, author of The Miracle Morning, suggests that successful people start their day very differently than the average Joe. He attributes a big part of their success to their morning rituals that spell the acronym SAVERS. And you all know how much I love acronyms. So let's break SAVERS down. S is for silence. This can be mindfulness, meditation, centeredness or prayer. But the point is, to stop and breathe. A is for affirmation. What do you need to be? Who do you need to be to succeed? Start talking to yourself like you are already that person. V is for visualization. What results would you like? Okay, go out into the future and see yourself experiencing these results so that when you get them, it won't be a surprise. E is for exercise. The purpose is not to gain fitness or lose weight, but to increase oxygen and blood flow to your entire body, including your brain. Something short and sharp like star jumps, push-ups, or a quick stair climb will do the trick. R is for reading. Learn something that will add value to your life. Stop reading when you've learnt one new thing for the day. This may be after one word, a paragraph, a page, or a chapter. And finally, scribing. Grab a nice pen and a clean sheet of paper and take some time to write or draw what's going on in your world. Every state is made up of three things. Firstly, physiology, your breathing, your posture, your exercise. Secondly, focus, your attitude, attention, energy. And thirdly, language, your self-talk, metaphors, conversations. Changing one or more of these can have a significant impact on your state. The rituals we practice need to be aimed at changing some or all of these things. So, who do you need to be? Once you're really clear about what you want and why you want it, the game-changing question is not, what do I need to do, but who do I need to be? Another way of asking this question is, what kind of person would have access to these outcomes? It's not simply the best or most talented sports person, artist or business person that ends up on the top of the pile. Despite what most people think, the best don't always finish first. Simply doing my best isn't likely to deliver the results I'm looking for. I need to find out what kind of person gets the outcomes I'm after. The question I need to ask myself is, who do I need to be? What kind of person makes it in this field of expertise when most hard-working or others get very little recognition or reward? What must they believe about themselves? How do they dress, talk, walk? What's their relationship with money? What story do they live out of? If I can be that kind of person, then I can have access to the same results as they do. The be, do, have model really unpacks how this works in the real world. That's be, do, have. And there are three common approaches to trying to get ahead in life as understood by this simple but powerful be, do, have model. Let's call them the victim, the worker, and the winner. The victim arranges their life in the order have, do, be. They say, when I have enough time, money and support, then I'll do the things I've always wanted to, and then I'll be happy and successful. The problem is, I don't have yet. If I had what that person had, I'd certainly be as successful as them, but I don't, so I'm not. The victim's always waiting for externals to change before they can move ahead in life. The worker is all about do, have, be. They say, the more I do, the more I'll have. The more I'll have, the happier I'll be. The problem is, the more I do, the more there's still to do. And the more I have, the more there is still to have. I'm defined by what I do, so I become driven, busy and tired. The more I have, the more there is to lose, so the harder I work. Now, by now, you can tell how I used to relate strongly to the worker. We all know that the link between having more things and being happier is a real myth, so being happy never arrives. But the winner orientates their life quite differently. Be, do, have. They say it's not what do I need to have before I can start, or what work do I need to do, but who do I need to be? What kind of person would have access to the kind of outcomes I want? Then, being that kind of person, what would I be doing? When I get that right, the having takes care of itself. Be, do, have is definitely the rarest of the three lifestyles and the most abstract. yet it's the only one that works. It really is the winner. Wow, now, I don't know about you, but all of these words of Jaemin's I find really insightful words of wisdom. So focusing on being in the right state, on managing my energy instead of my time, and continuously asking myself, who do I need to be? Getting clarity on these three principles, they've absolutely flipped my lid. And while I've sort of touched on them in the past, now I'm really excited about how these ways of thinking are going to turbocharge my future. And here's some more good news. Jaemin has just launched his new book, Unhindered, that gives you the 7 essential steps to eliminate your underlying insecurities that have and will continue to hinder your success if you don't remove them. Imagine how good your life will be once the hidden mental handbrakes of your insecurities are removed and you can achieve your ideal lifestyle by being in the right state, managing your energy, and being the person you need to be. So that you can then let it happen through your rituals rather than having to continuously push to make it happen through the slog of dogged discipline. Now, to whet your appetite on the 7 essential steps on to removing your insecurities and becoming unhindered, Jaemin goes through them in our awesome conversation today. And if Unhindered is anything like his previous book that I've just been reading from, then it's going to be life-changing as well as a great read. So get yourself a copy of it or his other books at jaeminfrazer.com/Jaemin Books. Now that's Jaemin, Jaemin, and Frazer, Frazer. So if you're serious about achieving sustainable success in any area of your life, then eliminating any deep-rooted subconscious insecurities and negative self-talk is going to be absolutely mission critical. So let me challenge you to start on this foundational self-help work because, as I always say, it's the start that stops most people. So to get started on yourself, just jump on our website knowhowproperty.com.au, hit the Get in Touch button, fill in your details and put Unhindered in the comments section, or just email me direct at bushy@knowhowproperty.com.au with Unhindered in the subject line and add a sentence on what you would do with your life if you were truly unhindered. And Jaemin has kindly offered complimentary copies of his new book for the best responses. In the meantime, get ready to soak in a wealth of wisdom as we enjoy this great chat with Jaemin Frazer. Welcome back, freedom fighters. Now, for many years, I've sensed and seen that our personal insecurities are our biggest limitations. Many of us are not aware of our insecurities, and if we are, we have difficulty overcoming them. And while insecurity has always been at the base of most of the world's ills, I also sense that in the world of amplified everything, for many, our level of insecurity is getting worse, not better. To me, insecurity is the insidious hidden villain with 1,000 faces. And while we all have them, we don't like talking about them. So to tackle insecurity head on and to help you eliminate your doubts, your fears and your self-limiting beliefs, I thought we'd do a deep dive chat on the subject with one of the world's leading voices on personal insecurity, Jaemin Frazer. So welcome, and let's get invested, Jaemin.
Hey, Bushy, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, really looking forward to it, mate. I think you're doing some awesome work in an area that is probably under-recognised but has a massive impact. But, mate, for those of the audience that haven't come across you, can I get you to start by telling us who you are, what you do and why you do it, mate?
Sure. So I'm Jaemin Frazer. I am the founder of the Insecurity Project, and I specialise in helping leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners, ambitious people trying to do good in the world. I help them solve the insecurity problem so they can show up to life at their best where it matters most. Why I do it, I think people suffer greatly and unnecessarily around unresolved insecurity. So this feels like the problem that I was born to solve, and it's something that I do with my whole heart and soul. So I think it's a global problem, as you mentioned, and is the biggest inhibitor performance, not only in business but in life in general. So it's a very important subject, and it demands a clear, intelligent, and complete solution.
Yeah, absolutely right, mate. I'm going to love diving into all aspects of that shortly, but just to kick off, I'd love you to take us back on your journey so far, if you don't mind, mate, and focus on where you've invested your time, your energy and your money, what you did and why, what did you learn from it, what were the wins, the losses, and how has that got you through to where you are today, mate?
Okay, so look, I think it's probably worth starting. It's worth starting when I got voted in a school captain at primary school. I reckon that's probably as good a place to start as anywhere. So, grew up in a country town, one of four kids, the eldest. So I was always a good kid, but a pretty shy kid. But I liked the idea of responsibility. I liked the idea of being a positive impact on those around me. And so it was a great honour. Like I thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to be the school captain? I'd seen good leaders go before me and thought one day it'll be amazing. But I didn't quite think that would ever happen. So it was a real honour to be captain there. And I think it kind of started a bit of a spark in me to go, okay, I do have some capacity to be responsible and to lead. So I probably invested in that idea as the first thing that I invested in, the idea of if you're responsible and you can set a good example for others. So that kind of followed through my high school years. I was a good kid, a shy kid, a quiet kid, but a good kid.
Hey mate, I'm going to dive in there. You've said that a couple of times now, a good kid but a shy kid. What's a good kid? I'm really interested in this. Is that what someone else said was good, or is that what people felt? I'd love you to sort of expand on that a little bit, if you don't mind. Why did they think you were good?
I think I had a strong moral compass even from a young age. I think I'm great. I really appreciate my parents. I'm very grateful for them, and I think they modelled, healthy values. They love each other. They've had a great marriage my whole life. They were good parents. They were generous people. Faith was a key part of their world. So they were kind. They wanted to help those around them. So I think they modelled that sense of morality and generosity. So that was something that appealed to me, and I saw that within myself as well, and I liked that. I liked that I could tell the difference between good and bad, and not because of what others said, but I felt like I could trust my conscience a lot of the time. So I think I invested in listening to my own insights around what was good and bad, and not being swayed by what others thought needed to happen. I think that's how I'd answer that question.
Yeah, no, that's good. That puts some real context around it. Sorry, and I interrupted there, mate. So, and clearly in the back of your mind there was sort of a semi goal of being school captain. Why do you think they selected you for that role? Is it because of what you've just said?
Yeah, I think it probably was. I think that people noticed that I made decisions that were towards values and towards being generous and being kind, and that I cared about other people. So I think even though I was shy and not very vocal, I think that's probably what others saw, and I think that's probably what continued to grow, because once I got a taste of being school captain, I remember setting my intention in year 7. I said, well, I might as well be the captain when I'm year 12 as well. And so I invested in that idea, and sure enough, year 12 I was the captain as well, and probably hadn't changed a lot in my ethos around being good and being quiet, being responsible, doing the right thing because I thought it was the right thing, not because it was necessarily popular. And so I think people just knew that I was responsible, and I think that was enough for them to get their vote to be a leader.
That quietness, I guess, came across. It can be read a number of ways, but sometimes quietness can be read as quiet confidence. Is that what you think you were portraying at that stage that sort of reinforced that? Is it more, and it was more by your actions rather than your words that people could measure you by?
Yeah, I think it was, but I was shy. Like I didn't have a lot of confidence really. I often remember being a home-baked kid. That was a term, others had given me. We didn't have a lot of money, and Mum was a sewing teacher, and so naturally she made all of our clothes, and often our clothes matched each other's as brothers, and so. I just remember the moniker of being a home-baked kid. So I wasn't one of the cool kids.
No.
I always tried hard when it came to athletics, carnivals and sport, but I certainly wasn't anywhere. I somehow had the good fortune of being invited to play basketball with all the cool kids. But, from year 3 to year 11, or year 12, I was the kid on the team that no one wanted to pass the ball to. So I would panic if I ever got the ball, even though I was always sad that I didn't. It took me a long time to develop. I was a late maturer. So I think there was a real lack of confidence in many ways. But that kind of moral backbone was the one quality that, I felt I had some kind of confidence in.
Yeah, so yes, it's interesting, mate. Because in many ways, I thought you were describing my own childhood because I'm very similar. Country boy, my brothers and I, exactly the same drill actually, and had a real lack of confidence on the sports arena. But I was better in my head, so I could work hard and overcome my own lack of adequacy just by working hard was pretty much the approach that I adopted early on. Where did that shyness and that lack of confidence come from, mate, do you think?
I don't know. I think it was just a comparison of looking around at the kids who had better talents, had more money, had natural, they were more attractive. I just kind of compared myself with them and thought, clearly I don't quite measure up. So I think that's where I just naturally ranked myself and thought, I'm just not one of those kids. So I'll just take my place here. I'll be a bit quieter. I'll be a good kid and a responsible kid. I won't get into trouble, and I'll do the right thing. But I'm not as good as these other kids.
Yeah, wow, that's a pretty big thing. Not as good as these other kids. That's a pretty big statement, mate.
Yeah, absolutely, and it certainly was a legacy that stuck for a little while. I think we grew up in a Christian home, and it was a Christianity that my parents, again, lived very authentically, and so it was quite appealing to me. And so that was how I thought about more confidence back then. I thought that I could find more confidence in a faith experience, in a sense of a relationship with God and feeling loved by that God. So I think that's how I compensated for my own shyness then, and I really threw myself into the church world. I translated that kind of moral backbone and into my Christian faith and my responsibility, and so kind of naturally emerged as a youth group leader in that space. And then, I was not sure what I was going to do when I finished school. I flirted with a bunch of ideas, from marine biology to landscape architect to civil engineer. In fact, I thought that the best place for me was to join the army and to do an apprenticeship, through ADFA, do my degree in engineering, and that was what I thought was going to work for me. And my natural leadership that I demonstrated as captain kind of put me in good stead down that path, and I made it through all the checks and balances until the final hurdle, and it was just when I finished year 12, and straighty 180, good kid, as I've mentioned 1,000 times already. I got invited to my mate's 18th birthday party straight after school finished. Got there a little bit late. I was starving. My mate says, Frazer, I've got just the thing for you, and sat me down to a plate of hash cookies. And I had no idea what I was eating. And so I'm enjoying these delicious treats, and I'm high on life because I'm just finished year 12, so I didn't kind of really notice what was happening. But anyway, sure enough, my army interview a week later got done for drugs. And so it was an incredible fork in the road experience where I was so devastated. But in hindsight, like, it's funny, I bumped into that guy like probably 10 years. I didn't see him for 10 years after that day, and I bumped into him in the Workers Club in Goulburn, and he was shocked to see me and nearly cried. Like, he'd clearly been carrying the guilt of that moment for 10 years. And he apologised to me, said, Frazer, I shouldn't have done that. I ruined your life, and I've been thinking about this ever since. And I said, oh, mate, like, I think you saved my life, actually. Like, I don't know what I was thinking joining the army. That would have been a disaster. So thanks so much. Marijuana saved me. Thank you.
I love that, mate. When the army career guy asked you the hard question, you would have been, what are you talking about, I'm guessing? You take us back there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was, listen, son, when was the last time you experimented with drugs? I'm like, oh, no, I've never. He said, well, the tests don't lie. Both your blood and your urine tells you you've got marijuana in your system. So that's instant disqualification. They tell your story walking. So it was quite a shock. And then having to explain it to my parents and, anyway. But I was at a bit of a loose end, and I kind of enrolled to do a landscape architecture degree at the University of New South Wales, then deferred for the year. And there was, youth groups are great for having camps, and they were always a highlight of my younger years. And there was a camp that I went to when I finished year 12, and it was a real life-changing experience for me because that's when I felt like I had a really profound personal experience of faith. It had always been something I liked, and it was kind of off the back of my parents' faith. Yeah. But that was the first time for me where it actually became real. Yeah. And it was life-changing. And from that moment, all I wanted to do was to help other people have that same experience. So then to take the leadership idea and go, well, I'm going to be a leader within the church. That is my destiny. That's what I'm going to do with my life. And it was so clear for me. And instantly, like, I got home from that camp. I never went back to university. I signed up for a diploma in theology instead in Canberra. Moved to Canberra, and invested in learning everything I could about Christianity with the idea of one day becoming a leader within the church. In that time, met my wife and got engaged and married, pretty young. At 19, we were married while I was still studying. And then, got given the leadership of the youth group in my church. And then a very short time later, when the senior minister retired / resigned, I actually got given the senior leadership of the church that I'd grown up in.
Wow. How old were you then?
I was 23 at that stage.
Massive.
Yeah, and we had a Christian school and a daycare centre at the time, so it was a baptism of fire. And 6 weeks into that, realised that the business side of things, the church, the school and the daycare was basically trading insolvently. Ooh. And so it was an intense experience of trying to navigate not only the leadership of the faith community, but the business aspect, without any business training. So, very, very testing time.
Talk us through that, because that would have been very challenging, mate. And it's like there would have been mixed emotions. I'm guessing that there's the honour of being, recognised as the leadership of quite a community. I'm guessing it was a country area, so a very respected position. And then the growing realisation, the more you dug into it, that holy hell, what have I inherited here? This has got some troubles. To talk us about the feelings you had and how you managed through that situation, if you don't mind.
Yeah. There was a business manager for the school and daycare centre, and he'd gone overseas for 6 weeks. And so I then had not only had the leadership of it, but I had the running of it as well, and no real help. And that was kind of my first discovery at the nature of the books. And and I just thought this is horrific. Like this is probably illegal. And when he came home, even though he was probably 30 years my senior, had all the experience and had been running the show, I just knew that I had to fire him. Like I just knew that whatever he was doing, he was being irresponsible, and he clearly wasn't taking responsibility for steering this ship and was not bringing it to our attention that it was trading insolvently. So I can still remember that meeting vividly because it was the first real opportunity to put my money where my mouth was and make a courageous decision to go, this isn't right. I know I don't really have authority over you, but I have some moral obligation to say that we can't keep doing this. Like, this is not going to work, and I can't see how we can sustain your position knowing that we're trading insolvent. So,
how did that go, mate? Because I might be a little bit off here, but painting the picture that I'm seeing, here's a guy that's 30 years your senior. He's probably been in the role for quite a length of time, pretty comfortable. He's probably, in his own right, well respected amongst the church community. Sure. He is a young 23-year-old Johnny come lately saying, mate, we can't do this any longer. How did that roll out, mate? Did you have that meeting one-on-one with him, and then what? And then
did.
You did?
I did that meeting one-on-one. It was kind of a surprise. I'd spoken to the leadership team, before that, saying this is my concerns, and they were all a bit cautious. Like, he's been here for 30 years. Like, he knows what he's doing, and he's sure. And I just couldn't fathom how everyone was so lax about it. And so the instruction from the team was, don't do anything rash. Just we'll talk about it when he comes home. Anyway, he came back off the plane, came straight from the plane to his office because there's something in his office he'd left there. And his question was, Jaemin, how was things while I was away? And I didn't have any intention of having the conversation then and there, but one thing led to another, and we had the conversation then and there. And I can still vividly remember him just going, wait, what? And he got a bit of paper and a pen, and he drew me at 23 and him at 53, and just to try exactly what you said. Hang on, who are you again? And what are you going to do? And you're here and I'm here, and the diagram, like, there was nothing on the diagram except a picture of him and me, highlighting the difference in experience and knowledge. And
I'm guessing you look like David and he looked like a Goliath, I'm guessing.
That's right. But I just hold firm. I said, I don't know, but the one thing I do know is this isn't okay, and I'm going to hold you responsible for mismanaging this and not alerting us soon up. So I'm going to fight this battle. So that's what we're going to do. So just kind of backed myself there and had that conversation. And there was a bit of a big fallout as a result of that. Some people who liked him and didn't think my decision was the right one. But anyway, that it began the process of kind of me taking leadership of that group of people, and then navigating the closure of businesses, the sale of properties, and paying back tax debt and unpaid super, and leading that community. So there were probably 3 years of real heartache trying to navigate that. But the idealism of youth, it was probably useful that I was green behind the ears and didn't know that, because I had such a conviction that all would be well, that I was doing God's work, and that we'd find a way through. And so that's kind of what we did.
Yeah, I love it, mate. I love it. That is a massive challenge to take on, and you would. I can imagine that everyone would have been going, "Does this guy really know what he's doing?" There would have been a lot of that, given that the sort of culture that had probably grown up around the business manager and the level of acceptance that had. Once the bird was out of the cage, there would have been some wide eyes, I would imagine, and then some real challenges to actually manoeuvre through that. And you would have worn the brunt of most of that, mate, at a fairly tender age. How did that affect your? Because you said you had that moment on that school camp that was, it's almost like an awakening. Like I've got this deep personal experience of faith that has become the driving force. Did any of that experience start to dent the shine on that while you're sort of managing it, mate, or not?
No, I don't think so. I think that only got stronger through that period, and I think that was what I kept relying on, and that was my confidence. It was very much a confidence in God more than a confidence in myself. I think at that point, as a young man, and yeah, so that's how I navigated that. But it was challenging watching this play out, because I think, again, the idealism of leading a faith community, I just imagined that it would be everyone's intention would be to do the right thing, and everyone's intention would be to be authentic and all in. But the nature of religious organisations is they're very political. They're business operations. There's people who tie their identity with their roles, and there's a bunch of stuff that's happening behind the scenes that's very different from anything to do with faith. And that was the great challenge for me, to navigate that stuff, because it always grated with me, and I wished it could be different. I wished for a pure version of community that didn't need to be tied to an institutional model. And eventually, at about year 8 of leading that community, I had a Mal Meninga moment, is the only way I can describe it. I don't know if you remember Mal Meninga's first day of politics. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do, vaguely. But let's expand on it for listeners, mate, because
it's one of the great moments in Australian political history. Someone's convinced Mal that he should run as an MP, and he's in, and his first day, first press conference, 100 journalists pumping him with questions, microphones everywhere, and he gets 3 or 4 questions in, already sweating, and he just stops in a moment of awareness, takes off his lapel mic and just goes, "Yeah, I can't do this," and then that's it. Walks out. It was just incredible. And I think, although my tenure was a lot longer than 20 minutes, I reached a point where I'm like, I just can't keep doing this. This is not working for me. And the great crisis was the challenge between an authentic experience of faith community and the mess and minutiae of institutional religion and organisational dynamics and leadership power plays, and so it caused me all kinds of grief. And so I contemplated, walking away from the ministry then, but I instead decided to confront some of the institutional problems as I saw them, and so I proceeded to kick everyone out of the church for 3 months and close the doors. So growing up in a Pentecostal church, I'm sure there are plenty of people listening who have no church experience, but just a quick insight about Pentecostalism. If you think about Christianity, there's the 2 sides of the fence, the Catholics and the Protestants. But in the Protestant side, there's 30,000 Protestant denominations. So there's a very wide variety of expression and experience. So the Pentecostals are probably up the contemporary end, and their leadership structure is much more autocratic. Whereas down the other end, there's lots of congregational style leaderships and very traditional forms, and and similar to some of the the ritualistic Catholicism. Anyway, so that's to say, I had a bit of power as a Pentecostal leader, so so I had a vision for what needed to happen, and I decided that's what I was going to do. So I decided to shut the church, kick everyone out for 3 months, and just call people to an account and go, what are we doing here, folks? Are we just playing a game, or is this real to anybody? This doesn't look like much that resembles anything I read in the Bible about the message and ministry of Jesus. This looks like something that we do to feel good about ourselves that is very disconnected from any kind of real life scenario.
Mate, that's I love it. I'd take my hat off to you. That very gutsy and strong, courageous manoeuvre. Yeah. How did that go down? I just share that.
Not well at all. There are still people in my hometown who would cross the other side of the street if they saw me, 10 years on, many people, their only way of understanding that decision was that I was the Antichrist.
Stop.
It was horrific. Like it was very messy. There were some people that just were absolutely horrified that I would dare do something like that. And so, we had a church of maybe 120 or so, and of that, there were only 30 that came back in 3 months. So I bit the hand that fed me in many ways, and so I had to explore some other work. I got a job as a school chaplain when John Howard first put out some funding for chaplaincy. I had an opportunity to become the chaplain at the local high school, which was an incredible experience.
I just want to step back there from a minute before we sort of go into that then. So that you've gone from 120 back to 30. And many people would say, again, looking from the inside out, being brought up in a strong Christian family myself early on, that you're sort of like Jesus overturning the traders in the foyer of the church, basically saying, this is rubbish. You can't do this here. I'm sure the 30 would have been on side because they obviously understood your vision and were probably troubled with the politics and the other institutional game playing that goes on when man gets involved in anything that's a good idea, and it tends to go that way. But how did you emerge from that and then go, I'm now Mal Meninga, I'm done here, I've got to go.
Well, Mal Meninga was before that. Mal Meninga was the decision that made me shut the doors. That was Mal Meninga. Yeah. When people came back in 3 months, it was the most lovely experience of faith community I've ever had. That the next 2 years, it was really cool because people were there because they wanted to be there, not because they had to be there.
Yeah.
We were very fluid, and as is the case in any organisational structure, the origins are often looked back on with the most fondness because there's the flexibility to reinvent and do something that's very current and present, that's not encumbered with years of tradition and politics. So it was a lovely experience. But it kind of opened up a can of worms for me that I hadn't imagined, in that, one good question leads to two, and two lead to five, and questions have the ability to change everything. So it was an exploration for me in my own understanding of faith and calling and purpose and a whole bunch of things, because I could no longer, rely on the security of paid leadership and a bunch of people who had given me a platform to speak every week. I kind of deconstructed that hierarchical leadership structure and just said, we're a bunch of people gathering around a common ideal, and everyone has a part to play in that. So it meant now I was out of a career, really. So, and the financial challenges that came with that, and the purpose challenges, it was a really interesting time of reinventing myself in that period as well.
Yeah, okay, and we'll come back to this, but I'm guessing you were confronting some of your own insecurities on this journey through the fire that you were putting yourself through.
Well, I did. I mean, the first one was to go, okay, so I'm comfortable in this church world. That's where I know I've done my time, built my craft. I'm passionate about that, but now I've got to go find work outside that. So the first option, the school chaplain, I remember seeing the ad in the paper and thinking, this could really work. While I wasn't that confident and comfortable at school, I've kind of developed a bit of confidence in my public speaking, and I think, I reckon I could fit in with high schoolers again and relive some of my school years. That'd be fun. And but I went to the school to apply, and a good mate of mine actually had got in before me and really thought that position was his. He was doing casual work at the school at the time and thought he'd add casual work and chaplaincy at the same time, and just thought it was wonderful. And so I called him and said, look, mate, I don't want to cut your grass here. I'd like to apply, but I know that you've got your eye on this job. And he said, go for life. You're welcome to apply. He says, I'll get it, but you're welcome to apply. And so, okay, great. So, sure enough, I got the job and he didn't, which was a surprise to both of us. But it was such an interesting experience in Insecurity, because day one, I can vividly remember the school principal saying, "Righto, Jaemin, you're the first school chaplain here. We don't even know what a school chaplain does. So just go and can you just go and be there for the kids? Can you just go do that? Like, you're not a teacher, you're not a parent, you're a chaplain. Just go chaplain." Like, that was the job description, So I'm like, okay. So I look out in the school and there's like 800 kids, and I'm thinking, you can't just bowl up to teenagers and be friends with them. These kids are going to beat me up.
They're going to go,
lunch, mate.
"What are you on, mate?" Yeah.
So then I thought, I'm just going to hide in my office and wait till the needy kids come find me. That wasn't the mandate. I'd been told, go into the school, make a difference here, add value, show us that this is a good position. And so it was a really stark moment of going, it's not going to work for me to be insecure here. This is not going to serve me. And so I had these beliefs that were true for me about who I was and what I could do from my own experience at school, and I had to confront them straight away. And so I'd begun to explore some personal development stuff and just realised a bit of the nature of beliefs. And so my early on experiment was to go, what if I was to put on a new belief like a jumper every time I got to this school? And the belief was, everybody here likes me, why wouldn't they? Because I kind of knew that whatever you believe, you'll find evidence for. So I had a bunch of evidence that you can't make friends with teenagers and people are going to think I'm weird. But what if that's not true? And what if everybody here likes me, why wouldn't they? And so I literally put that on like a jumper every time I got out of the car.
Love it.
And then started to find evidence.
Let me jump in there, because I know, having spent a long time doing affirmations, and I reckon for 3 years I repeated affirmations that in my head I'm going, this is bullshit. I don't believe a word of this, but I just kept doing it because someone told me it was a good idea, and all of a sudden, without me even, it's like a frog in a boiling pot. All of a sudden, it was like, I do believe this. And things started to change. Is that what you found? Like that's a pretty gutsy effort, mate. Actually, and
I'm a very pragmatic person. So I'm oriented by what works. So I went, okay, I'm here as the chaplain for 2 years, so I want this position to work. So this old belief is not going to suit that role. It's going to cause a bunch of pain. It's incongruent. So I have to find one that works better than that. Whether I believe it or not doesn't really matter. I got to find a better story. And so I was really adamant that that's what I was going to try on, and show up to school as though everybody liked me. Why wouldn't they? And any evidence I could find that they didn't like me, I just put it down to they just didn't know me yet. And so you can imagine how different that went quite quickly, because if I, bowl up to year 11 students and I think, I'm supposed to be here, but I think you don't like me, I'm going to be nervous, I'm going to be silly, I'm going to try and make jokes, and they're going to think I'm a tool, and then it's going to go badly. But if I bowl up to them already knowing that they like me, why wouldn't they? Then I'm relaxed. I'm not even worried about me. I can be totally focused on them. I'll be interested in what they're doing. I'll remember their name. I'll remember what's happening. I'll say good day when I see them in the playground. And it's going to get much better. And even if they talk about me behind my back when I'm not there, well, I'll delete that evidence because it's not what I'm looking for anyway.
Like I've got to step in there, because that's quite a revelational awareness that you came to for a good kid and a shy kid at school who would have walked into that school with exactly those. All of those feelings would have flooded back.
Yeah, they did. They'd so flooded back. It was very interesting, and it was high stakes, but it was all about the outcome I was looking to get. And I think, preempting some of the insecurity framework we'll cover a bit later, being clear about what you want, it is such a central part of personal development, because it just gives you a reason to do what's hard. Yeah. You lose sight of what you want, and there's no point. So, as chaplain, one of the ideas that I had was, how I could make a difference to the school is, what if I did a thought of the week on assembly each week? And, I've kind of I've built my craft as a public speaker within the church world. I wonder if I could speak on assembly. and kind of it was a good idea before I'd thought about it too much. I'd been given a microphone, and literally that I was given like 2 to 3 minutes with these criteria. It had to be funny, meaningful, memorable, not overtly Christian. How do I tick all these boxes? And if it was anything other than that, I'd be mauled by these kids, and laughed off the stage. And so Thursday morning had come around, I'd be like, oh no, it's they used to call me Chapo. It's Chapo's thought of the week on assembly. What am I going to say this week? And I would just stress and sweat about it all morning until I came up with an idea. So often, like literally 60 seconds before I'm going on, I'm still finalising what I'm going to say. But I just got up there and swung away, and then, wrote the excerpt of it for the school newsletter each week. And it kind of got a bit of a cult following, and it became the thing everyone used to look forward to at assembly. And by the time I finished there at the end of 2 years, and the last Chapo's thought of the week, I told them that I was actually quitting the job and I was going to start my own coaching business, which I've jumped ahead a bit. But all that to say, every kid in the school stood up and gave me a standing ovation. Massive. And the principal looked at me and said, Jaemin, no one has ever had a standing ovation in this school. And I just remember thinking, holy smokes, that's the power of a changed belief, because I would not have got that result had I hung on to my old belief, which I was sure was true. It turns out, look, I've got evidence. Everyone here likes me. Why wouldn't they? They're all on their feet. And that was a very defining moment for me about the notion of how malleable beliefs and story was, and how much evidence we can find when we change these stories.
Yeah, I love that, mate. And I think the sharpening of the sword that you were doing every week for yourself, by having to come up with something that was funny, memorable, and not overly Christian, and the connection you would have made with the kids, because adolescents in particular, if it's a high school, they're looking to laugh. So if you made them laugh every week and you left them with something memorable and no doubt meaningful, then you would have had quite an impact. Probably more so than the teacher in the classroom, actually. As a consequence of that, and at the same time, from a personal perspective, forcing yourself to face that challenge every week. It's I do the same with these podcasts, and I do a weekly bush bite, and that challenges me every week to step up to the plate, and that the personal development that comes with that is exceptional, and I love the challenge of it. And probably without knowing it, you were doing exactly the same. Was it a conscious thing, or it just sort of happened?
Well, I said yes, I'd do it from the start, and then I'd committed myself, and so then everyone expected it, and I was in. So I kind of said yes, work out how later, and then I had to do it. It was the hardest speaking gig of my entire life. And but you're right, the amount of personal growth that happened in that experience by going outside of what was safe. But again, it was part of my rationale for how can I make as big a difference as possible here. Imagine the honour of being given the microphone for 2 hours a week, the opportunity to speak to this whole school and give them something that's meaningful, and give them something they could remember, and give them something that could help them navigate some of the challenges of being a teenager. That'd be a real treat. I reckon I could work on my own insecurities in order to be able to be useful like that to these kids.
Love it.
So that's kind of what got me across the line.
Love it. I love the size of the challenge meant that you force yourself to step up to the plate, which is just brilliant, mate. So you sort of jumped ahead and talked about the coaching exercise. So you obviously got to a point in the being Chapo. I was like, there might be more, or I'm looking for something else. Talk us through what your thinking was and how that led you into the coaching thing.
I mean, I was getting paid very, very minimally to do a job. I enjoyed it. It was only 2 days a week. I was still getting a little bit of income from the church, but it wasn't a sustainable plan for either of those two things. And I had a young family at the time. Just thought, this is not really the future. Plus, I'm developing all these skills. I'm diving into personal development. I'm growing my ability to influence. And then amazingly, I invited a mentor of mine to come run a church community, and I asked him to bring some personal development content with that. And so he brought some coaching frameworks that I'd never heard before, and it literally blew my mind. And I just thought, that is a missing technology. As pastor, I was quite a frustrated pastor because, as pastor, you're invited into people's world to talk about change, the deep issues, the challenges in their relationships and their finances with their kids. You're kind of invited to be there for those kind of pain points. But the conversations about change very rarely led to change, because the typical response was to outsource the change work to God. So, I'll pray about that, or I'll just trust God, or I'll read my Bible. If I pray enough, then God will magically somehow fix my marriage or restore my relationship with my kids or get me that promotion. So it was this very childlike response to life. And it always troubled me. I just thought, I'm pretty sure there's more to it. I'm pretty sure we're invited to participate in this process. And the way I see it, I think the greatest gifts we've been given as human beings is responsibility and choice. So anyway, when I got exposed to the coaching skill set, I just thought, you're kidding me. Like, where has this been? This is a technology that belongs, and I need to learn this right now. I am a bit impulsive as well as being pragmatic, and so when I got my head around an idea, I want to do it yesterday. So I literally signed up for a diploma in life coaching, the very next day after that church camp. And it was day 2 of my first 3-day intensive a month later. And I'm just like, that's it. I'm going to quit my job as a chaplain and I'm going to start a coaching business. And I called my wife and told her this great idea, and she cried, not tears of joy. The other and she's like, what are you doing? Like, I'm like, I've got this. I can make this work. This is so cool. I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to change the world. And the coach training space is very hyped up. And looking back on it now, my goodness, there was a lot of froth and bubble in it. Everyone comes out of that room after 3 days feeling like, they're going to change the world and be millionaires.
They're selling the dream. Yep.
Yeah, it certainly was a lot harder than that. But I kind of thought it wasn't like I was transitioning from car salesman to life coach or, engineer to life coach. I was already in the space of working with people and
totally
thinking about change. So it felt congruent. It felt like a continuation of purpose. I just had some better tools. So I was confident that I could be useful. So I gave myself 4 weeks to make it work. That's how much notice I gave the school. The school principal just said, Jaemin, you are an idiot. Like, literally, this is going so well. We love you here. The kids love you. You're great at it. You're going to be a life coach? What even is a life coach? You're going to be a life coach in Goulburn? Like, people don't pay for life coaching in Goulburn. You're an idiot. He literally called me an idiot 3 times. But I just knew, I got this. This is right for me. And so some strange confidence, I went out and had a crack. But 4 weeks, it was much harder than I thought, and I didn't land a single client. And it was
I'd normally talk about any successful business taking at least 2 years and 4 years before you start to make a difference. So 4 weeks was a pretty tall order.
I know, I was highly ambitious, but it was incredible. On the last day, I had money from the school. I remember driving around town, and I was just questioning what I'd done and thinking about the foolishness of my plans, and just thought that one last time I had the words of the school principal ringing in my head. He just said, look, if you don't want to be chaplain here, you should go work for Campbell Page. They're an employment agency doing some good work with the unemployed. I think that might suit you. And I just kind of went, whatever, when he said it, because it was kind of a backhanded remark. But for whatever reason, that business name was there in my head as I'm driving around town. And so I thought, no, I'm going to drive into Campbell Page. And so this employment agency, I walk in there. I didn't know that the manager at the time was a girl that I'd gone to school with. So she knew me and asked what I was doing. And I said, I'm a life coach now. And she said, that's really interesting. We were just talking about how desperately we could use a coach working with our long-term unemployed. And she said, what could you do? And I said, well, matter of fact, I could do a whole bunch of good here. And And so she said, well, what's your program? I said, oh, look, it's a 6-week program, covering these 6 ideas, and just kind of making it up on the spot. Okay, great, that sounds good. And what would you charge? And I don't know, I just kind of pulled a figure out. Well, that will be fine. Oh, my goodness. And then she says, would you be free to start next week? So I look in my diary and pretend that there's actually something written in there that I had to shift around. And looks like I can start. Look at that. What a great thing. And within 2 weeks, she'd give me a start at 3 locations. So I was kind of coaching 18 clients a week, long-term unemployed clients who with significant barriers to work.
Wow. And
they'd given me their hardest, most recalcitrant people to say, all right, swing away, life coach. What can you do with these people?
Test that out.
It was such an incredible experience because I'd found a way to earn money, which that was amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm like, wow, if these ideas are going to work, well, they got to work with the down and outers. They got to work with the people who've given up hope, who are significantly stuck, who've been written off. So I brought my A game and went, right, well, this is a privilege to serve you. And I can still vividly remember early on conversations with people who were profoundly stuck, some illiterate, some had massive abuse, some had people murdered in their family, some had been unemployed their whole life.
Yeah.
But watching what happened when they understood what happened, responsibility and choice, just those simple ideas, and swapping them out of the victim space and helping them take control of their life and watching them get hope. And it was such a privilege and very impacting on me. And I discovered something in there which, now has become like probably the central part of all my coaching work. And that was what happens if you can set up a clean conversation with someone. So I noticed that everyone had an agenda for these people, like their friends and family.
Judgment.
Yeah, there was total judgment. They wanted them to be better than they were. They needed them to be better than they were. The employment agency, they would get paid the most for having their longest term unemployed get work. So they were their most lucrative clients. So there was a bunch of pressure from everyone in their world. And so I rocked up and I just said, like from the very first start, I said, and by the way, you cannot confuse me for someone who gives a shit about you. I know I look like a guy who cares, but you can't confuse me for someone who gives a shit. And I held that line as hardly as I could. I knew that was my only opportunity to serve these people. I had to make sure that they knew that I was not someone who wanted them to do something they didn't want to do, that my only value to them was to serve them to get more of what they wanted. But they had to want it. And I was so sure that they did want something. I was just so unprepared to believe their story that they didn't want anything, that they were satisfied being stuck.
It's probably not their story, though. It's a story that had been imposed on them, hadn't it?
Of course. So, anyway, it just created this cleanliness, this ability for them to come out of hiding, have honest conversations.
Love it.
Conversations.
Let me dive straight in there because, people would have... they would have loved the honesty, because that would have been the first time that anyone had ever said that to them. I'd absolutely guarantee it, because all the you got two sides of the fence in that whole equation. You've got the do-gooders who are doing it, and they want to help them, but they don't really want to help them, because if they help them too much, then they do themselves out of the job. And
the risk.
Yeah, exactly. And then on the other flip side of the coin, you've got those who really don't care and pretend they do. But no one would have said that to them. When I can imagine the looks on the faces when you said, "Well, don't mistake me for someone who gives a shit." That would have, the reaction would have been interesting to start with before you then empower them to go, "This is about you taking control of your own life." Yeah, that would have been quite amazing.
There was one guy who I just thought, I got to push this as further than I've ever pushed before, because when I got to the agency, they'd said, right, we're giving you our hardest guy. He's been on books for 3 years. He's just a deadbeat. Like, his dad bankrolls him sees no financial pressure. He sits in the dark room playing PlayStation all day. He's done every program, zero motivation. Like, this guy he's a waste of space. Like, that's how they framed it.
Wow.
And so I thought, okay, this is interesting. So I walked in the room and I just went, "G'day, mate. Just wondering, are you a piece of shit?" And he said, "Pardon me?" I said, "Are you a piece of shit?" And he stood up and he came over and eyeballed me. And he said, "Don't you dare speak to me like that again." I said, "Oh, fantastic. I mean, I didn't think you were. These guys out here just said you were a no-hoper who had no ambition. I couldn't imagine that was true. I just had to find out for myself." And so he was like, "What just happened then?" And from then I had him, because it was like, "Don't tell me you've got no ambition. Don't tell me you're satisfied hiding in the dark room doing nothing with your life. Like, all right, there's more to this, and you've already just you've outed yourself as someone who has ambition." So
love it.
It created a very different conversation than they'd ever had before. That was the point, and they kind of got that early on, because I just was so non-negotiable about that. I realised if I could set that space up from the start, then I could be useful. If I lost that space and I brought my caring into the conversation, or I was going to encourage them or believe in them or fix them, it was game over. So that always stuck with me.
Because of that paternalistic sort of undertone that sort of goes with all of that is part of the reason why it doesn't work. So coming back to, and you've mentioned it a couple of times again, that the responsibility and choice, which then leads to hope, they are the keys. And when someone's woken up to the fact that if it's going to be, it's up to me, then that puts a completely different inflection on the whole equation. Man, I love the freshness of that. It's very refreshing to hear. Tell us about the results that flow out of that. I can imagine they'd be pretty amazing.
They were amazing, and the employment agency was amazed. Like, there were people making change, making real change. Not only getting jobs, but dealing with dysfunction in their life, ending addiction, reconciling with family members. There were people making some significant life changes. And it was incredible. And it kind of created a problem for me, because the employment agency were like, "Well, okay, this is great. Where else can we do this?" And it fed into my ambition. I was like, wow, maybe I could develop a program and then train others to run this program. And I kind of proceeded to do that. And, had at the height of that operation, had 30 coaches working for me, delivering a program that I developed for employment agencies. But
massive.
It all kind of the quality control on it was pretty ordinary. The front end looked all pretty good. The back end was a nightmare, and it was so overwhelming. And
it's the old story, though. The better you get at something, the less you do of it, and you end up trying to train other people, and often you then become a manager, not a doer. And that managing piece is just a whole different world, isn't it?
It is, and it turned out it was a lot harder to train coaches than I imagined.
Because they all think they can.
They all think they can, that's right. But, they would often get in the way. They often wouldn't have the insights and the intuition to be able to hold the space. And so the results started to fall away, and, it got pretty messy. So I went into business partnership with another coach at that time, and that was a really interesting moment of insecurity for me, because when it all started to fall apart, I think, I'm not a business guy. So I need to outsource the business side of this to someone else and defer to their wisdom, and I'll just be the coaching guy. That didn't go that well in the end. It kind of, I just really dropped, like, I took my eyes off the business piece entirely and just trusted someone else to take care of that. And you're back with the
business manager of the church, mate.
What's that?
You're back with the business manager of the church.
Yeah, that's right. And so it didn't end up going that well, and the business model got very top heavy very quickly, and lost a fair bit of money, and it all kind of ended in tears after 5 years.
Wow.
So it was an interesting exploration in the cost of insecurity there, because it was like, wow, why couldn't I trust myself to think about solving some of these problems myself rather than not wanting to think about it and paying someone else to worry about that stuff because I didn't think I was good enough. But it was kind of in that window that I really uncovered a mountain of insecurity that probably, seeded where I am today with the Insecurity Project. And that's when I went to write my first book because I'd probably thought about it for some time that it was possible and that I might have had something a day to say. But the whole coach training world was so hyped up and, it was a possibility space and so positive and empowering. And, so I kind of was encouraged, okay, go write your book. And so I thought I could do this. And I got an idea and then I started telling a few people about it. And I can vividly remember the moment I decided I'm actually going to go write this book. And I told my best friend and my wife, when I was away in Melbourne one time, I called them and said, this is what I'm going to go do, and went back to the hotel room and wrote the first chapter of my first book. I'm so excited and so passionate and there's so much energy. But then literally the moment I shut the lid on my laptop at about 11 o'clock that night, all that passion and excitement and energy turned to fear and dread and holy shit, what have I done? Now I've put it out there. What if I can't? What if it's no good? What if I'm a failure? What if people hate it? And it was ferocious. I don't think I slept all night, just this anxiety and kind of uncovered this real imposter fear inside that I wasn't good enough to be one of the big boys. I wasn't really capable of real influence. And it was horrific. But it kind of, because it was so intense, I also made a commitment the next day that I would find a way not only to manage that insecurity, but I would find a way to solve it because I kind of realised that if I didn't, that was good night to a bunch of dreams and ambition that was growing in me, that I wouldn't be the kind of guy that kept stepping up, that would be my limit. I would grow to that point and no further if I didn't find a way to solve this problem. So that was a really key moment in my life.
Totally, and because I guess you in a sense, without if there was growing awareness, but you were swimming in a sea of insecurity. If you look at the stuff you were doing with Campbell Page, at the root cause of all of those issues with the people you were working with was insecurity. You'd just been through 5 years of pain in your own business. And often most people externalise this stuff and go, well, it was their fault, or it was the situation's fault, or it was someone else's fault. If I'm threading something through all of your experiences so far, you've got a real self-awareness there, Jaemin, that very, very few people do, or if they do, it comes very late. Where did that self-awareness come from, do you think?
It's a good question. Perhaps one of the gifts my parents gave me was just they did like asking questions. They were naturally curious, and they modelled a capacity to handle questions. So I think that always appealed to me early on, and I think the pragmatic nature I developed that required questioning to go, okay, could this work better? And in order for something to work better, you kind of got to review what's not working that well. So I think I invested in that idea and kept growing the awareness piece because it kept getting me more of what I wanted, and it kind of came to see it as a central part of growing up and becoming an adult was the ability to kind of know yourself.
Well, that's a great sort of transition right into the heart of the subject now, because there's insecurity over everything that we've been talking about in the last 20 minutes. I'd love now to sort of delve into that because, I've felt for some time that it's the ill of the age, that, if you trace a lot of problems in the world, and it's always been this way too, by the way, whether it be dictators. Let's look at Hitler, the most insecure person I reckon that ever walked the planet. You look at if you look at health issues, obesity, smoking, drinking, addiction, drugs, workaholics, just about every addiction and ism that we have can eventually be traced back to some form of personal insecurity. I'd love for you to talk about that subject now and define, how you what is insecurity in your terms, and talk to us about some of the symptoms and some of the pain and the issues that flow from it.
Yeah, okay. I think that the simplest definition would be a fear of inadequacy, a fear that you have to be exposed as not being enough. So this fear that if you were to fully show up unguarded and present, then everyone would see the things that are missing or lacking, and that's the height of insecurity. So you're right, it shows up in all kinds of ways, and I think insecurity unaddressed leads to madness. It's all that can happen. It weakens us significantly and causes all kinds of dysfunction. So it makes us show up at our worst where it matters most. And I think you're right. I think our world leaders are some of the more insecure people that we see. I think, without being political, I think Jacinta Ardern, one of her, from the little that I know and see about her, she seems to be one of the more secure leaders in the world. She seems more confident. There's less agenda around stuff to prove, and more common sense in her ability to just address issues, whether you agree with her the way she addresses them or not. She's much more believable and relaxed, whereas the other political leaders, there's so much spin and guff and game playing, all driven by deep insecurity.
Yeah, I 100% agree that she's comfortable on the skin, and that's the defining mark for me. And again, you'll know a lot more about this subject than I do. But when you come across someone who's comfortable in their skin, and therefore doesn't really care what other people think or say, doesn't expect everyone to agree with them, actually anticipates it, and sometimes actually enjoys the conversation that happens around the differences, and then celebrates them. It's pretty rare. It's pretty rare, mate.
It's incredibly rare, but it's beautiful. And I think the people who make the biggest contribution in the world do so from a place of deep security. They do so from a place of presence, with nothing to prove and nothing to defend. And that's always been so magical. When I see that, that's always just, I find that so compelling, and I want that for myself, and I want that for others. And so that's caused me to go, right, well, how does anyone solve this problem? I'm not interested in managing it. I'm not interested in just dealing with it the best I can. I want to solve it. And I'm convinced that some people have found a way to do that. So I think my life's work has been around deconstructing and making explicit that process for how people have done it throughout time, how they've found a way to show up unhindered by doubt, fear and insecurity so they can be at their best where it matters most. Rather than descending to madness. The
great word, unhindered. I love that word because there's very few unhindered people on the planet. Talk to us about then, given your personal journey, the work that you've done with people, and your reading and deep thinking that resulted in the great new book that's just about to hit the deck. Are you happy to share with us some of the things that the listeners can do to start one, recognising the insecurity, and two, working through it?
Yeah, 100%. It's always a great honour to have this conversation on this subject because it's so important. So I think that the start is practice one, is to step into the light. So Yoda says, "Named must your fear be, before banish it you can." So not a complicated concept, but a really hard one and a very important one. So I think most people are not aware that their enemy is insecurity, that they see pain show up in their life, and where they see the pain, that's what they think the problem is. So they see health pain or relationship pain or finance pain, or, so that's where they think that's where their problem is. So they've got a relationship problem or a money problem, and that's where they invest their time, energy and focus. But a bit of gentle inquiry would reveal that's just a symptom of a deeper issue. So I think practice one is around an accurate diagnosis, and a real problem-solving brain is super useful, just to go, hang on a minute, what problem are you most looking to solve right now? Are you sure that's the problem? Are you convinced that's actually the problem, or is that just a symptom? Because until you deal with the core problem, then you can never expect lasting change.
Yeah.
So I watch this in how people deal with insecurity, even their language around it is so imprecise a lot of the time. So, for instance, calling insecurity the imposter syndrome is not actually useful because it's an inaccurate bit of language. It's very imprecise. Jordan Peterson says, be precise in your speech. Things that go unnamed become monsters and consume you. So, just calling it the imposter syndrome gives it a label and makes it a thing that's outside you.
Mate, I love that. I love that, and we're so good at doing that though now, mate. We give it a name, and then you externalise, and it's not actually your issue anymore, or you give it a name that doesn't really. It makes it sound better than what it is.
Yeah, that's right. You get to wear it as a badge. Absolutely. So the start is simply just get crystal clear, be as precise as possible around what the problem really is, and it turns out that. I have this metric in my own problem-solving framework about anything, and I think when I define a problem and I think about the bottom of the problem, if that problem feels overwhelming and like I don't know where to start, to me that's really accurate feedback that I just haven't accurately understood the problem yet.
Yeah.
So the evidence that I've fully deconstructed the problem would mean that I know where to start and I can see the plan to solve this. So I think insecurity is no different. At its deepest level, the fear of being found out, the deepest level is it's always the personal implications of those fears. So by way of example, I ask people what they're most afraid of, and typically it's one of two things, either fear of failure or fear of rejection. Yeah. Generally, that people fall into those two categories, sometimes both.
Yeah.
But that's where they stop in their awareness. And so then they're paralysed because they're like, well, I'm afraid of failure, so everything I do could fail, so I don't really know if I should do it or not. And it's a very difficult position to find themselves in. Or the same, I'm afraid of rejection, so there's always this tension around putting themselves out there. But it's an imprecise way of understanding the problem because...
It's avoiding the problem.
Because it's not actually the problem. If you are afraid of failure, if failure is the problem, that's very unhelpful because the only way to protect yourself from failure is to never try anything.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly that's not tenable. Clearly people who succeed in life try things that don't work out all the time.
Yeah.
And the only way to protect yourself from rejection is to never have an opinion that's different. Never put yourself out there. So clearly, again, that's not the problem. It's just one level deeper. Be precise. And if you were to fail or if you were to be rejected, what would that say about you? Yeah. Now it's personal. That I am a failure or that I am not worthy of love. So it turns out the more you examine insecurity, what you are most afraid of is your own opinion of yourself, which is staggering to frame it like that, because the moment you understand that that's the problem, your own opinion of yourself, well, now you've got a way into solving it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I'm sort of giving you plenty of space there because I think you're getting right on the nub of the exercise here, and the challenge is in one being having the courage and the awareness to even recognise that. The next challenge then is how do you overcome your subconscious, that little thing that's been wearing away at 100 times 1,000 in our conscious brain. And our conscious brain says, yeah, I'm going to change this, but the subconscious going, no way, mate, I've been doing this for the last 50 years. Yeah.
Well, it's really interesting because I think there is a window of opportunity. In my book, I talk about the personal change bell curve and kind of highlight peak readiness for change. In my research, peak readiness is midlife. So there's a window of opportunity to do deep change work around your own opinion that doesn't exist forever. I think it's probably impossible to do deep change work in your opinion in your 20s. And I would go as far as to say that sometimes insecurity even serves you in your 20s because the drivenness to prove something means you're likely to to not adhere to rules and expectations and barriers, and you're going to go try what's beyond what's possible.
I love that. And no, you just described me, mate. I was in such a gut-busting hurry to get everyone else to say I was okay, because I didn't believe I was okay myself. And so I just absolute workaholic like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah,
looked great on the outside, looked awesome on the outside.
Exactly.
Didn't believe a thing of it, and you just had to keep working harder and running harder to try and keep fueling that limitless tank. And then you hit a brick wall, which is what happened to me. I hit the brick wall, and then I had my Howard Hughes moments of 2 years of very deep reflection on how am I going to change it, because I'm not going to end up back there again.
Well, it's what happens, because while it's useful in your 20s, that fuel is also poisonous. So it is killing you at the same time. And if you don't find a way to switch fuel source in midlife, if you're still being driven by the need to prove something into your 40s and 50s, it's very ugly. But I think so. There's this window of opportunity. 35 to 45 is peak readiness, but it's a bell curve, which means there's room for exceptions. There are people who are ready at 25 and 55, and some are ready at 20 and 60. But they are the exception, not the norm. So I would say the longer you leave it, the harder it is to change, because we're evidence gathering machines, and I'm sure we're all familiar with people late in their life who are now, they've embodied their insecurity, or their insecurity has embodied them. It's imbibed every cell in their body, and you're not having a rational conversation with them. Their fears have owned them. They've taken over to the point of madness. So it is high stakes, but the point is, the way into the conversation is essential. There's only one way in, and that's identifying that the core problem is your own opinion of yourself. Which is beautiful, because if it's your opinion, well, opinion, we don't use the word opinion for fact or universally verified truth. Opinions is the lowest form of knowing. So the reality is, when I cover this with people, the opinion problem often started when they were young, and it's just never been addressed. It's never been reviewed. So I worked with a guy who in his mid-40s, massive fear of rejection, seen a bunch of relationships end in tears, got all this evidence that people reject him, and he traces it back to his parents being divorced when he was 4, thinks he's a victim of that experience, and understands that they rejected each other and they rejected him, and so that's why he's afraid of rejection. Turns out that's not true. It turns out that when that happened, he had to make sense of it. The two sense-making questions are, why did that happen, and what does it mean about me?
Yeah.
So in every experience, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, from the moment we have any conscious awareness, we are asking and answering those two questions. Why did it happen? What does it mean about me? And so in that moment of turmoil as a 4-year-old, he's personalised that experience, formed an opinion that was his fault, that somehow he attracted that, caused that, which therefore makes him dangerous to the people that he loves. So he's formed this opinion at 4. It's gone unreviewed for the next 40 years, and, as you would imagine, created havoc in his life.
Yeah, and it's so true, mate. I've seen that as well, and kids, because the world revolves around kids, because that is their world, then they are the start and the cause of everything. And if something major like that occurs, then that they are going to blame themselves, and then they will carry it. That's an awesome insight. Sorry, mate, I interrupted.
Well, no, that's exactly right. It's so true. So it's unavoidable that kids will form opinions. Like, but you think about the opinions a kid forms on their best day are going to be crazy, let alone their worst day. It's, of course, we're going to develop limiting beliefs. That is inevitable. Even like I love having coaching conversations with people who describe that they had perfect parents, because even perfect parents don't prevent children from picking up limiting beliefs.
Yeah,
like we're the storyteller. We're not the actor. We're the one with the pen and paper, deciding what things mean. So practice 1 is to name the problem and fully own that that's actually what you're fighting against. It's to turn all the lights on, do an accurate assessment of where he's here. And then from there, it's just we practice 2 as 100% responsibility, which sounds cliche, but the simple idea is, once people identify that they have a low opinion of themselves, and that's the problem, they typically want to blame someone for that opinion.
Yeah.
And they think, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I know I've got a low opinion because this happened or that didn't happen or this was said or that didn't, wasn't said. But just this simple understanding of human psychology is that we are the storyteller. We're not the actor. So Don Miguel Ruiz, in his book, The Four Agreements, he says, no one has the power to bless us or curse us without our permission.
Yeah.
Like our life is shaped by the agreements we make with words. So it's not that someone said you're stupid. It's that when they said you were stupid, you agreed.
Yeah.
So that is incredible, because it just means rather than taking 100% responsibility, you kind of realise you already are responsible. You already are the one writing the story. You've always been writing the story. So you know how to tell stories. You've been telling them your whole life. With some awareness and some coaching, you could write some new stories. You could deconstruct those old ones, go back and review the data, explore those opinions, find out where the gaps were and the holes, and write new opinions.
Yep. And by taking responsibility for that, as soon as you're pointing the finger at something or someone else, then you're not doing any more work, because the issue's with someone else. It's not with you.
No, and it makes sense. I mean, I say to people all the time, you're well within your right to blame the people who've hurt you and ripped you off and used and abused you, and no one can say that's a wrong thing, that you shouldn't blame them. No one. The only deficiency with blame is that it just gives you no power to improve your situation. So all change starts and ends with responsibility instead.
Yeah, I love that. Yep. So once you've taken responsibility, where do you go from there?
So 1 is step into the light. 2 is responsibility. 3 is to stack the pain. So pain, all change, or deep lasting change, comes from a point of great pain. This is how people smoke. Like I've often been fascinated. How in today's world, knowing what we know about cigarettes, can people still smoke?
Yeah.
Governments put grotesque images on packaging. There's billboards, there's ads. How can people smoke? And the answer is very profound. I don't know whether you've considered this, but it's just because we don't have to pay attention to everything. We get to choose what we pay attention to. So it's possible to ignore the cost of smoking and to focus on the benefit. Yeah. And if you do, then you'll continue. However, the people that quit, they pay attention to some different stuff. They do an accurate cost assessment, realise that it's costing them more than it's giving them. That creates a massive pain response. Every cell in our body is hardwired to move away from pain. So therefore they have a high level of motivation to do whatever it takes to quit smoking.
No, I love that, because it comes back to the power of the story again, because if the story in the head is more focused on the pleasure of the smoking than the quite obvious pain, then the pain can be overlooked. It's pretty powerful. That's very powerful.
Well, the thing is, insecurity is exactly the same. Just because something's killing you doesn't mean you have to pay attention to that. So people who change this actually stop and do an accurate assessment of the impact of unresolved insecurity in their life. And they realise it's horrific. They realise it's ruining everything. They realise that it might have served them in their 20s. Now it's making a mess. If you haven't resolved insecurity into your 40s, now you're an insecure wanker. Like, now you're not fun to be around. Like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, you're that guy. You're that guy who's needy and insecure and always got to be the centre of attention. And, like, it's no fun for anyone, let alone you. So to stop and notice that, it's painful. Yeah, that's the point. And pain's a beautiful gift designed to move you away from danger towards safety. So everyone who's ever solved this problem has done so because they've stacked pain.
What a great expression, mate. I'd never heard that before. Pain is a beautiful gift That is a great way to reframe that pain is actually the trigger for positive change. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's 3. 4 is the other side of motivation, because if it's just a pain avoidance strategy, the moment you make change and the pain dies down, and so does the motivation. So Anthony Robbins teaches this. You've also got to have a moving towards strategy, not just a moving away. So practice 4 is to have a compelling life vision. So I alluded to this when I was talking about being chaplain, because I had a vision for what I wanted. That gave me a reason to do the hard work. Give me a reason to change my story, a reason to walk into fear, a reason to confront some underlying limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
So, the hero's journey is a classic example of this. The hero, in order to risk life and limb, they've got to have a quest. There's got to be something compelling they're trying to do or achieve. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, why is Frodo facing orcs and, all kinds of horrible things if he's not trying to do something meaningful? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So this process grinds to a halt very rapidly the moment someone loses sight of why and what they're trying to achieve and what their life is really about. Steve,
I want to jump into this one, because this compelling life vision is something that we spend a lot of time working with our clients on. And, the first question I ask people when we catch up with them, Jaemin, is, so describe your ideal life to me. What does it look like? And 9 out of 10 people would say, gee, Bushy, I never thought about that before. And it's amazing. It's amazing, because it's we help with people with property and finance, but there's no point even worrying about property and finance if you've got no idea how's that going to help you? How's that going to get you to where you ultimately want to be? How you ultimately want to live? How ultimately you want to make a dent in the universe? How do you take them through that process? Because that's a very challenging process for a lot of people.
Well, the way I think about it is the what do you want question. It's the question that the kids desire, like young kids, they're ready for that question.
Yeah.
But as a responsible parent does not trust a child with the what do you want question, because they're going to do all kinds of crazy stuff. They're like, no, trust me, obey me. No, you can't have your iPad all night. No, you can't eat junk food. No. So they kind of gradually release more of that question to them.
Yeah.
So it's the question that kids desire but are not ready for, but it's the question that adults are ready for but don't want. By the time you get to the real world, like I'm always fascinated by asking Year 12 kids, what do you want? And none of them know. It's like you ask the 3 kids the Year 3 kids what they want, and they all know. But, 5 or 6 years later, they've worked out that's not how the world works. You don't get what you want. You settle, you survive, you fit in, you don't stick out. It's dangerous knowing what you want, because then that can set you up for failure and rejection and disappointment.
Wow. That's at Year 12. You're seeing that at Year 12. That's amazing. 100%
at Year 12. They've already decided it's safer not to know what you want. So, I would say that's the way the world works. There's only less than 5% of the world's population who know what they want, and the 95% who don't know what they want just help the 5% get what they want. That's how it works. However, to desire is human, so each of us do have an idea of the ideal. It's just because of insecurity, people kind of shut it down because it's too dangerous. So I think the way I address it with people is to explain the big picture of how it is part of being a human being and why it is the most dangerous but the most important question in the whole world. And so it's about uncovering it again, going back into that dream space, knowing that it's dangerous but knowing that it's also beautiful. And the more permission they give themselves to go there, the more clarity emerges around that, and the more strength that vision, gives them, and then the more motivation, and then the process continues.
Yeah, it's a self-feeding and self-reinforcing mechanism. I'm one of those vision board nuts, mate. When I had my car crash in my mid-30s, I really sat down and reflected on how do I want to live, what contribution do I want to make, how am I going to help? And I revisit that every year now, and it's very empowering and quite amazing how effective it's been actually in completely flipping my lid and keeping me focused on the things that are important. So
Yeah, great.
Certainly something that I'd love people to embrace. And would love to talk to you after the chat today about more of that, because I think that purpose piece has and the hope that goes with that has some very healing possibilities across the board. But I digress, mate. So yeah, the compelling vision is an awesome step to start moving towards, as you say, which is a great expression. Once someone has a feel for what that looks like, where to from there?
Yeah, sure. So practice 5 is to get help from someone who doesn't care about you. So that kind of sits over the whole model. But at some point, you're going to need to seek out a wisdom character. That's a central theme of every hero's journey. There's always a Gandalf, a Yoda, a Dumbledore, a Mr. Miyagi, because it turns out we need help. So that's really important to realise, you can't just do this on your own, because you need objectivity. You need wisdom. You need someone who can hold the space for you. But the point is, there's so many people in the coaching, counselling, psychology space that confuse the world about who the hero is.
Yeah, they want to white knight the damn thing themselves.
Yeah, so it's a little challenging to find the right person, but they do exist. And they're people that hold the space without getting in the way, and they provide a high level of objectivity, which is essential to break a story, because you think the story's true, but it's just a work of fiction. And it's so hard to get outside of your own head with enough distance to look back in and see the holes in your own story. So,
yeah. And then I guess what goes with that is that a partner or another family member or someone who's very close to you isn't the right person for exactly those reasons, because they've got a vested interest, and their emotions are going to get in the way of that objectivity.
Yep. Exactly right. Yeah, they care for you, and they should, because they do have a vested interest, but they're not going to be the people that help you change. So then that's practice 5. Practice 6 is to go be the hero. So at some point, the hero's actually got to go do the thing that they're most afraid of. Frodo's actually got to go throw the ring in the lake of fire. Daniel's son's actually got to go fight the bully. The hero's got to go be the hero. So in the context of insecurity, at some point, you got to go face this deep fear. Are you good enough or not? And plumb the depths of it. Like this monster that's been taunting you, saying, no, you're not good enough, there's something missing and lacking. Well, you've got to go find out if that's true or not. This journey is always toward the thing you're most afraid of, which is your own opinion of yourself. But there's only one way of finding out if it's true, and that's to fully go there. When you get there, it's just like the Wizard of Oz, and it's all smoke and mirrors. Of course, you've always been enough, but no one can tell you that. You got to find that out yourself. So a big part of the hero work is the origin, is to fully deconstruct all the opinions, all the agreements, all the stories, all the beliefs you've formed about yourself throughout your life. So there's some work to do, and it's honest work and hard work, but beautiful work, going back and just analysing the data of your life and reviewing the meaning and stories. And it's the work that the wisdom character prepares you well for, but can't do for you.
Yeah.
And then finally, practice 7 is to rewrite the story. So I find people hearing this model often want to rush to practice 7 and go, oh yeah, I get it. Surely we don't need years of therapy. Surely, I don't need to go back into the dark past. Can't I just write some affirmations on my mirror and, tell myself how awesome I am? But, you can do whatever you like. However, if you don't deconstruct the old story first, the writing piece becomes a behaviour management exercise. It's futile. And the moment you get tired or anxious or something doesn't work out, the old narrative just takes over, as it always has.
Yeah.
You're back to where you started. So it is essential to clean the space, deconstruct the old story, render it nonsensical before you can use that pen and paper again and write the script the way you'd like it to be.
And embed it. The work you described me again there, I did all the affirmations and all the fun stuff and all the rest of it, and then kept finding that I was sort of reverting back, and then it wasn't until I did some deep hypnosis work that really, really dug into the subconscious, where all of that habitual thinking was embedded. because the surface stuff that I was doing wasn't really getting back to the core, that things started to move in the right direction. So yeah, rewriting the story, there's some deep and hard work that needs to be done there, and I don't think it's a one-hit wonder either. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. It's a constant exercise. You've got to keep working at this. Am I right in saying that or not?
Well, yet my distinction would be it is possible, entirely possible, to solve insecurity at your current level of growth and to show up unhindered where you are.
Yeah.
However, when you show up unhindered at your current level of growth, the natural implication of that is you will move forward, you will take new territory, and you'll move into new levels of uncertainty, which will uncover new levels of insecurity.
Yeah.
So that's no problem, because it just means the same 7 practices that got you unhindered at the last level of growth will be the same set of practices you use again.
Yeah.
So that's how I would say it. It's not evidence that you've regressed, it's evidence of growth.
Yes.
And it's the same process every time.
Mate, I love that. And in the uncertain, dynamic, constantly changing world that we're all now in together as a result of what's happened in recent months, and will continue to. I think the speed of uncertainty and change is here to stay with us. It's only going to increase, not the other way round. Then having a framework like you've just described in so much great detail as a way of tackling that and continuously, sharpening the sword so that we can function and perform in the world is brilliant, mate. You've done some awesome work around that, and I'd really appreciate you going into that detail to sort of just the name of because the book's just about to come out. Just refresh us, mate, so that the guys, now they've got a taste of that, can go out and grab it.
It's called Unhindered, the 7 essential practices for overcoming insecurity.
And that it hasn't quite hit the decks yet, has it? They can pre-order on your website, is that right?
You can pre-order. I think I'll have it back Friday, this Friday's date, the 17th, so it's not far away at all. Maybe by the time this podcast is live,
it will be.
It may be out.
It will be out. That's brilliant, mate. Mate, I want to transition now into what I call the ambush series, which is just the 5 quick questions that the readers always love to share your wisdom on. And you've given us some great ones already that are probably your quotes during the discussion, but what's your favourite quote and why, Jaemin?
So this one from Peter Drucker has been stuck in my head for at least the last 6 months, and I just think it's staggering. It's beautiful. So he says, productivity, in my experience, consists of not doing anything that helps the work of other people, but to spend all one's time on the work that the good Lord has fitted one to do, and to do well. So it's a really counterintuitive idea, but one I've just found so much solace in, especially writing my book in the last 3 months, because I feel like I've been hiding in a cave. But that's what I've been doing. It's like, this is your mission. Just do this. This work is important work. It's your work to do. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. Just do your work, run your race, and bring a gift to the world out of the essence of who you are. So that's a very meaningful quote to me at the moment.
Yeah, I love it, and this has been the blessing of the contagion for me, mate. Is that it's created opportunities like this that you probably would have. I mean, the book's probably been a work in progress for quite some time, but suddenly there's a window of opportunity there where you can really burrow down and get your teeth into. What a great thing! That's just a.
It's exactly that was the gift for me, 100%.
That's brilliant, mate. Now you've just mentioned your own book, which I'm loving what we're hearing. There's some really unique thinking in that. So I'm going to be one of the first people lining up to grab a copy, mate. But what's the top book apart from that you'd recommend people read, and why?
It's a tough one, but I'd probably say The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. The tagline of that book is it says a book of wisdom, and I can vividly remember flying. That was a good memory. I can't wait to fly again. But yeah, anyway, I was flying to Melbourne reading this book, and felt like I had a deeply spiritual experience while reading it, which I think that's what wisdom is supposed to do. It's supposed to impact every cell in your being. I just think the way that he describes such simple ideas, but with such depth and such beauty, to me, that is a must read. it's such an exquisite book. Only a little book, but a very powerful book.
I haven't read it, mate, so I'm an absolutely rabid reader, so that goes straight on the Kindle list, mate. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's a cracker. Now, this one feels like a bit left field, but it's something that constantly raises its head with a lot of the listeners because a lot of Aussies feel they pay too much tax. What's the top legal thing that you've done to minimise the tax that you pay, Jaemin?
I've hired a Greek accountant. with a and he loves it. Like he loves finding tax advantages, loopholes, all legal, but he just froths over that kind of stuff. So that's been my great decision, just to find someone who just is excited at saving tax. Yeah. And to let him find anything he can do for me. So
you love it.
I don't really know everything that he does, but I know he does a great job and I don't pay very much tax.
There you go. No, that's the best answer, I reckon, because a really good accountant who knows it's creative, but within the letter of the law, can't get any better on that. Mate, back on the investment subject, and this is broad in the investment area, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you believe you've received today?
Oh, boy, I think I got caught up in some get-rich-quick schemes early on. So the advice was, look, they're great opportunity, and they weren't great opportunities. They were shonky, and I should have known, but got caught up in the hype of fast returns and quick gains.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Look, I think the best investment advice I've ever received is that you yourself are your greatest asset. So the investment you make in your own life, that'll be the thing that pays the biggest dividends. It'll improve the quality of your marriage, your relationship with your kids, your health, your friendships. You'll be nicer to be around. You'll leave more of a legacy. So I think that is something that I think about very dearly to keep growing who I am as a person and to invest in my own growth and development as the number one priority.
Yeah, love that, mate. No, absolutely right. And it sort of indirectly revolved that, but it's the day-to-day stuff. What's a personal habit that you believe contributes most to your success today?
Habit is not a word that I particularly love because of its connections to discipline. So I think self-discipline is motivation 1.0. I think it's a young man's strategy. I think self-permission is motivation 2.0. And so I love the word rituals rather than habits. So rather than forcing myself to do something that I don't really want to do but I know I should do, I give myself permission to go where the life is. So I would say rituals that are consistently add value to my life would be time at the start of the day to ask myself what I want around good food, good coffee, good music. So those rituals that just put me in a great state are always so life-giving and have definitely added incredible value to my life over the years.
Yeah, and that's you've just I've never actually thought about it. And the power of words is it can change worlds. I'm actually going to change that question from now on to what's a personal ritual, mate? Because you're right that the connotation of habit is the should part of it, which is. We're doing it because we have to, not because we want to, whereas a ritual is something that we enjoy doing. That's a great reframe. Thank you, my friend. That's
my pleasure.
Yeah, that's very good, actually. Mate, the final question, and it's going to be a great summary of everything that we've spoken about today, but if I gave you a microphone that spoke to every single one of the 7.7 billion people that are currently enjoying the world, and I gave you a minute to talk, what would you say?
I've been thinking about this. You did preempt this question at the start because I wouldn't want to tell everyone in the world about insecurity because I think it is a conversation for midlife, really. So I would have a conversation about going where the life is and this ability to go inward and explore who you are and to listen to the sense of life inside you and to be accustomed to what is life-giving and move toward that and away from what produces death. I think it's such an intuitive piece, but everyone has that internal compass around what is life as opposed to what is death. It's different from what's right and wrong and what's good and bad. I think it's a more useful metric and would be good for the planet if we'd all move closer toward life and further away from death.
Yeah, great way to put it, mate, because, again, the good and bad has judgment attached to it because who decides what's good and what's bad? Whereas life and death, well, they are, aren't they? You're either moving towards life or you're heading towards death. So which one do you want to choose? That's a great way to come back and reframe that essential question of, well, what do you want? Mate, really got us thinking today. I love the conversation. You've been very generous with your time, Jaemin. For those who want to reach out to you and either learn more or do more with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, so if you Google the Insecurity Project, you'll find my podcast. You'll come across my website where you can grab a copy of one or both of my books. Otherwise, I'm on the socials as Jaemin Frazer, Jaemin, Frazer with a Z. Not too hard to find at all.
Brilliant, mate. Been very generous with your time, mate. Really enjoyed it. I'm going to talk to you again because there's a lot there that I could keep talking about for hours, but really appreciate your time, mate, and I know that we're really getting the audience thinking long and hard about some of the challenges they've got in their lives at certain stages, particularly in midlife, and the opportunity now that they have before them to start digging into that and improve some things. So thanks again.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure.
Thanks, mate. Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's hello@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get-invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die